Parents called me a loser and laughed out loudly until they saw my face on a billboard. "No way that's you," my mom gasped. I handed them my business card and said, "Believe it or not, I own this company." I never wanted to come to this dinner. But when my mom called, saying it had been too long since we all sat down together, I knew what she really meant. It had been too long since they had the chance to sit me down, pick apart my life, and remind me how much of a disappointment I was. Still, I showed up. Maybe a small part of me was hoping this time would be different. The diner smelled like burnt coffee and fried food, same as always. It was the kind of place that hadn't changed in decades, with cracked red leather booths and a jukebox that only worked half the time. My parents loved it here, said it was classic. I always thought it was kind of depressing, but maybe that was just because of the memories attached to it. I sat across from my parents and my younger brother, Ryan. He looked sharp, as always, in his button-down and Rolex. Meanwhile, I was in a plain t-shirt and jeans, looking like someone who didn't belong at the table. Which, honestly, I never really had. Dad took one look at me and let out a sigh. "Jesus, Nathan, could you at least try to look presentable?" I exhaled slowly. "Here we go. Nice to see you too, Dad." Ryan chuckled, shaking his head. "You know how he is. He just wants the best for you." "Sure. That's what they always said. We just want what's best for you, Nathan." But somehow, their version of best never included what I wanted. A waitress came by and took our orders. My parents barely glanced at the menu before ordering their usual steak for Dad, grilled salmon for Mom. Ryan got some expensive-looking pasta dish, and I went with a cheeseburger and fries. As soon as the waitress walked away, Dad leaned forward, clasping his hands together like he was about to say something important. "So," he started, "what exactly is it you're doing these days?" I wiped my hands on my napkin and shrugged. "Same as before. Working on my business." Ryan raised an eyebrow. "Oh yeah? And how's that going?" I could hear the skepticism in his voice, like he was already preparing for the punchline to some joke about me. I met his gaze and smirked. "It's going great, actually." Mom gave me one of her tired, sympathetic smiles. "Nathan, honey, you're almost 30. Don't you think it's time to look into something more stable?" There it was. The same thing they've been saying for years. I wasn't stable enough. Not like Ryan. Not like the son they actually respected. Ryan sipped his iced tea and leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. "Look, man, it's not that we don't believe in you." "Yes, it is," I cut in. "That's exactly what it is." Dad let out a laugh, shaking his head. "Oh, come on. Don't be so dramatic." "I'm not," I said, keeping my voice even. "I've spent years working on something I believe in, and instead of asking about it, you all just assume I'm failing." Ryan smirked. "Well, are you?" I bit my tongue so hard I tasted blood. If only they knew. If only they had even the slightest idea. The food arrived, but I had lost my appetite. Mom took a bite of her salmon and gave me a worried look. "We just don't want you wasting your potential, sweetheart." "Yeah," Dad added. "I mean, look at Ryan. He's got a solid career, a wife, a mortgage. You're still what? Playing around with some little project?" I clenched my jaw. "It's not a project." Ryan chuckled again. "What is it then? A startup? An idea? Come on, man. You can be honest. We're family." Family. That word was starting to taste bitter. I set my fork down. "You want honesty?" Dad wiped his mouth with a napkin and gestured vaguely. "That'd be a nice change, yeah." I inhaled deeply, steadying myself. They weren't ready for the truth. But maybe it was time they heard it anyway. So, I leaned forward, meeting each of their eyes. "I run a company. A successful one. One that's been growing for years. I have over 200 employees. Offices in 3 major cities. Contracts with companies you probably hear about on the news. That's what I do." Silence. For the first time in my life, they were actually speechless. Ryan was the first to break it. "No way." Dad scoffed. "Oh, come on. You expect us to believe that?" Mom looked confused, maybe even a little worried, like I'd finally lost my mind. "Nathan, be serious." I reached into my pocket, pulled out my wallet, and slid my business card across the table. Ryan picked it up, reading the embossed letters. Then he blinked, his face going pale. "My full name. My title. CEO. You're lying," he muttered. "Am I?" I said, tilting my head. Dad took the card from Ryan and stared at it, his mouth pressing into a thin line. This has to be a joke." I smiled. "It's not." Mom looked from the card to me. "But how? You never said anything." I shrugged. "You never asked." The silence stretched on. It was the kind of silence I had been waiting for my whole life. And then, as if the universe had perfect timing, Ryan's phone buzzed on the table. He picked it up, glanced at the screen, and then his eyes widened. Slowly, he turned the phone around so we could all see. It was a picture. A massive billboard, right in the middle of downtown Chicago. And on it, my face. Bold letters underneath read, "Nathan Carter, CEO and founder of Cobalt Enterprises." Mom gasped. Dad's hand tightened around his fork. Ryan swallowed hard. "No way. That's you." I leaned back in my seat, completely at ease. "Believe it or not," I said, taking a casual sip of my now cold coffee, "I own this company." And for the first time in my life, my family had absolutely nothing to say. Mom reached for her glass of water with a slightly shaking hand. She took a sip, set it down, and stared at me like she was trying to put together a puzzle where none of the pieces fit. "Nathan," she said slowly, "is this real?" I didn't answer right away. I just let the question hang in the air. Ryan was still gripping my business card like he expected it to change into something else if he looked long enough. Dad, on the other hand, was still stuck in disbelief, his expression flickering between confusion and something else, something closer to anger. I leaned back, stretched my arms over the back of the booth, and finally spoke. "Yeah, Mom. It's real." Ryan let out a low whistle, rubbing his jaw. "No way. No damn way. You mean to tell me you built this?" He gestured vaguely toward the phone screen, still showing the billboard with my face on it. I nodded. He let out a short laugh, shaking his head. "That's insane." "Why is it insane?" I asked, my voice even. Ryan blinked at me, like I had asked the stupidest question in the world. "Because it's you, man. You're just—" He cut himself off, but I knew exactly what he had been about to say. "You're just Nathan. The one who wasn't supposed to succeed. The one they had already written off." Dad cleared his throat, setting his knife and fork down with a clink. "All right, let's say we believe this. Let's say you actually run this company. What does that even mean? What do you do?" It was almost funny how dismissive he sounded, like he was trying to reduce everything I had built into something trivial. I sighed, but I didn't let my irritation show. "We're a tech consulting firm. We handle infrastructure, cybersecurity, software development. Some of the biggest companies in the country come to us when they need solutions." Ryan furrowed his brows. "Wait, hold on. You never even finished college." I smirked. "You don't need a degree to run a company. You just need to know how to solve problems and build the right team." Dad scoffed. "Oh, so you're one of those guys. The ones who drop out and think they're the next Zuckerberg or whatever." I shrugged. "I don't think I am. I just am." Ryan laughed under his breath, shaking his head again. "Man, this is unreal. And you never told us?" "Not once. Would you have believed me?" I countered. That shut him up real quick. Mom, who had been quiet this whole time, finally spoke. Her voice was softer, more hesitant. "Nathan, sweetheart, why wouldn't you tell us?" I looked at her, really looked at her. Her eyes were full of something different, something like regret. I took a deep breath. "Because every time I try to talk about my ideas, you all shut me down. You laughed at me, told me to get a real job, told me to be more like Ryan." I exhaled through my nose, shaking my head. "So I stopped telling you things." Mom's face fell. Dad just frowned like I was being dramatic again. Ryan looked away, focusing on stirring the ice in his drink with his straw. No one spoke for a while. Then, Ryan cleared his throat. "Okay, so, let's say all of this is true." "It is true," I corrected. He waved a hand. "Yeah, whatever. My point is, you're successful now, right?" I narrowed my eyes slightly. "Yeah." His expression shifted into something calculating. "And you've got all these connections. Money, power, influence." I already didn't like where this was going. He leaned in slightly, lowering his voice. "Look, man, I could use a little help. The company I work for, well, let's just say things aren't as stable as they seem. If you've got any openings," I laughed. I actually laughed. Ryan blinked. "What?" I shook my head, still chuckling. "You spent years talking down to me, calling me a failure, acting like you had everything figured out. And now that you know what I have, you suddenly want a job." Ryan's jaw tensed. "Come on, man, don't be like that." I tilted my head. "Like what?" Dad, who had been quiet for a little too long, suddenly spoke up. "Ryan has a family to support." His voice was firm, pointed. "You don't." Oh, there it was. The unspoken "you don't" matter as much. I nodded slowly, pretending to consider it. "So let me get this straight. Ryan spent years belittling me, and now you're telling me I should hand him a job just because he has a family." Dad's eyes darkened. "Family comes first." "Does it?" I shot back, my voice cold. "Because it sure as HLL never felt like I came first." Silence. Mom reached for my hand across the table. "Nathan, that's not true." I pulled back before she could touch me. "It is, Mom, and you know it." Her face crumpled, but I wasn't in the mood to comfort her. Not after everything. Ryan leaned back, crossing his arms. "So what? You're just going to be petty about this?" I smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "No, Ryan. I'm just doing what you guys always told me to do. I'm looking out for myself." Dad scoffed. "That's a real selfish way to look at things." I arched a brow. "You'd know." His eyes flashed, but I didn't give him the satisfaction of reacting. Ryan exhaled heavily. "Man, I don't get it. Why are you so bitter? You won. You proved us wrong. Isn't that enough?" I studied him for a moment. "Then," I said, "maybe it would have been if you had believed in me before I made it." Another long, heavy silence. The waitress came by, clearing our plates, oblivious to the tension at the table. Mom was the first to break. She rubbed her temples, looking exhausted. "Nathan, sweetheart, let's just calm down. This doesn't have to turn into a fight." I sighed. Maybe she was right. Maybe it wasn't worth it. But then Dad, In that dismissive, gruff tone he always used, muttered, "Still don't see what the big deal is. It's just a business. Doesn't make you special." And just like that, my patience was gone. I slowly turned my head toward him, my expression unreadable. "You're right, Dad." I reached into my wallet again, this time pulling out something else. A check. I slid it across the table, folded neatly. Dad frowned, unfolding it. His eyes scanned the numbers. And then he froze. I watched his face drain of color. His mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. Mom leaned over, peeking at the check. Her hand flew to her mouth. Ryan snatched it next, and when he saw it, he actually gasped. It was a check for $10 million. Signed by me. Dad swallowed hard, his hands trembling slightly as he set the check down. His voice, for the first time, was barely above a whisper. "What is this?" I smiled. But this time, it wasn't friendly. "That," I said slowly, "is what you called just a business." And for the first time in my entire life, my father had absolutely nothing to say. Dad just sat there, gripping the check like it might disappear if he blinked. His face had turned a shade paler, his fingers pressing into the paper so tightly I thought he might rip it. Mom was still covering her mouth, eyes darting between me and the check, like she couldn't comprehend what she was seeing. Ryan. Well, Ryan looked like someone had just kicked him in the stomach. I leaned back in my chair, took a slow sip of my coffee, and let them sit in the weight of the moment. Then, after what felt like an eternity, Dad finally spoke. "You're joking." I snorted. "Am I?" Ryan cleared his throat, his voice strained. 10 million? You're telling me you can just write a check like that?" I smirked. "I could write 10 more if I felt like it." Silence. Mom, bless her, still tried to recover. "Honey, we never meant to make you feel like we didn't believe in you." I tilted my head. "You didn't believe in me." I turned to Ryan. "You still don't." Ryan exhaled sharply. "Man, come on. You can't blame us for being surprised. You never gave us any hint that this was happening." I raised an eyebrow. "Really? Or did you just never care enough to ask?" He looked away, pressing his lips into a thin line. Dad finally set the check down, but he still looked rattled. "If you have this kind of money, why the HLL didn't you say something sooner?" I let out a humorless laugh. "You really think I owed you that?" Dad scoffed. "We're your family." That word again. Family. I studied him for a long moment. Then, I picked up the check, held it between two fingers, and slowly tore it in half. Dad's mouth fell open. Ryan looked like he'd just watched someone set a pile of cash on fire. "Dude, what the HLL?" I shrugged. "You don't get to act like you care now that you know I have money." Mom looked pained. "Nathan, we were just worried about you." "Were you?" I asked, my voice calm. "Or were you just embarrassed by me?" She flinched like I had struck her. I sighed. I wasn't here to make my mother cry. I wasn't here to rub anything in their faces, at least, not in a way that was cruel. But I needed them to understand. I leaned forward, placing my hands on the table. "All I ever wanted was for you to support me. Just a little. Just once. But instead, I was treated like a failure before I even had a chance to prove myself. And now that you know what I've done, now you care." Dad shifted uncomfortably. Ryan was still tense. I exhaled, shaking my head. "You know what's funny? I spent years wishing you'd see me, that you'd finally respect me. But now that I have everything I ever wanted, I realized something." Ryan frowned. "What?" I gave him a small, satisfied smile. "I don't need your approval anymore." Silence. Mom let out a quiet breath, her eyes shining. "Nathan, I'm sorry." I nodded. "I believe you." And I did. Mom, at least, had some regret. But the truth was, I wasn't looking for apologies. I wasn't looking for anything from them anymore. Dad grumbled something under his breath, still trying to process everything. Ryan looked lost, like he wasn't sure how to react. I slid out of the booth and stood up, grabbing my wallet. Ryan blinked. "Wait, where are you going?" I dropped a few $100 bills on the table, more than enough to cover the meal. "I have a meeting downtown." Dad scowled. "Oh, so now you're too good to finish dinner with your family?" I chuckled. "No, Dad. I just have better things to do." Ryan shook his head, letting out a breathy laugh. "Man, you really changed, huh?" I met his gaze, smiling. "No, you just never really knew me." And with that, I turned and walked out of the diner, leaving them sitting there, stunned, drowning in the weight of everything they had just learned. For the first time in my life, I felt truly free. I didn't need their validation. I didn't need their respect, because I had already won, and they knew it.